So I'm going to jump into this. So the main takeaway I want you to go home with, or to stay home with in this case, is don't rush into a bankruptcy filing. So this information, there's general information I'm putting out there that maybe it is for your specific situation. Maybe you haven't been financially affected, but a loved one has, a client has, a family member has. So you can pass on this information to them, and hopefully they can avoid a rush bankruptcy filing, because unfortunately what my colleagues and I are seeing right now is similar to what happened post the 2008 recession, where there's just a lot of advertising being thrown out there and a lot of aggressive tactics to get people to file bankruptcies. And in this situation, I want to just share what options are available out there. And I think right now, whoever is calling me, and my phone is blowing up, by the way, but a lot of my colleagues and I are just turning people away right now. We're telling them, here are your options, wait it out, see how things unfold, because maybe a lot of you won't actually need to file for bankruptcy. And so I'm gonna start the first portion of my presentation will be going over what options are out there, including types of government assistance that you can take advantage of. And the last part of my presentation, I'll focus on the last resort, kind of, if in a few months you still can't get out of the situation and you need to file bankruptcy, then we'll go over what options will be available to you via the bankruptcy code. And of course, as attorneys, we're always making disclaimers. This is, for educational purposes. And the information is changing daily. So this information is current as of this morning, but please check in with your individual creditors, because their policies might have changed, and possibly for IRS, franchise tax board, all of those things, their policies are changing as well. So I want to start out with the easiest one. If you're finding yourself in a situation where you can't keep up with your credit card payments, a lot of people are under the impression that they can just skip their payments and their creditor is going to be automatically fine with it. You need to realize that none of this is automatic. You have to apply for the assistance, and you have to let them know that the reason you cannot make your payments is related to COVID-19. So you were financially impacted by COVID-19. Most of the credit card companies right now, if you log on to your usual credit card login, you're going to find a COVID-19 section that's going to have Q&As. Usually they might have a dedicated phone number on there, or you call the number on the back of your card. What I would actually recommend is, they're so backed up with calls right now. Their wait times are 3 to 4 hours. So most of them have built online platforms where you can request a suspension of payments online. So that's going to be your quickest way to get that handled. As of right now, most credit card companies are offering about 3 months of skipped payments. Again, you have to enter into that agreement with them. You have to let them know. The good thing with this is they're waiving all the late fees for that period that you're requesting, and there will be no negative reporting of late payments. Keep in mind that the interest in most cases is going to continue to accrue, so be mindful of that. So with everyone, what I'm telling them is, if you're in a position where you are able to make your payments, whether it's your credit card, your car, your mortgage, whatever it is, please go ahead and make those payments. The information I'm presenting today is for those people who simply don't have another choice, because none of these are ideal kind of scenarios. It's just, it's a temporary Band-Aid for the time being. And what I'm also recommending people do is, when this is all over, go ahead and monitor your credit report. And I think it's always a good idea to monitor your credit report regardless, because there's always inaccuracies on credit reports. So make sure that there's no negative reporting that was a result of you skipping payments, with an agreement you entered into. And if possible, for all of these agreements, request that they be in writing. So I want to move on to vehicle loans and leases. The trend I've been seeing is that if you're leasing your vehicle and if your lease is scheduled to end within the near future, most lenders are willing to just extend out your lease for another 3 to 6 months. And some creditors, like Chase, for example, they're doing this automatically, and they give you the option to opt out of it and turn in your lease on time if you wish. It's best to contact your servicer directly to see what their policy is, or better yet, check it online. Some reasons why you would want to delay your lease ending is maybe right now you don't want to take the car in or deal with one extra person that you have to see. Some of them are offering to schedule a pickup, but not all of them. And then, right now you don't have to deal with repairs in case you needed to make repairs to your car before you turned in your lease. And also right now you wouldn't really worry about a new down payment for a new lease. But keep in mind that you can defer some of your lease payments. Again, most of them, they're doing up to 3 payments, but understand that these are not forgiven. So you're going to have to make up the balance of that at the end of the lease for most of these companies. If you're financing your vehicle instead, then most of the car lenders are offering you the option to skip 3 payments. Again, you have to request to enter into an agreement with them and be approved for it. And what most of them are doing is they'll extend the term of your loan by the number of the months of payments that you're skipping. So if you skip 3 months, then you're going to pick it back up and your loan is going to be extended 3 months from its original term. For both of these options, again, just like the credit cards, as long as you've entered into an agreement with them and your reason for non-payment is related to COVID-19 financial distress, there's going to be no late fees and no negative credit reporting. Now I want to move on to mortgage loans, and these are going to get a little bit more tricky. So I'm breaking up the mortgage loans into those that are federally backed mortgage loans and then the conventional loans. Let's discuss the federally backed ones first. So that's, you're looking at Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. If you're not sure if your loan is serviced by either one of these, I've included the websites where you can go and check. It takes just a few minutes. You type in, I think your full social or the last a few digits, your address, your information, and it's gonna let you know in just a few seconds. So if your loans are serviced by Freddie Mac or Fannie Mae, then you have a little bit wider options. They're giving people an automatic 6-month forbearance period if people can't make their mortgage payments due to COVID-19. Again, you have to apply for this, but as far as getting approved for it, that one is pretty much automatic as long as you're following their guidelines. They're not really asking you for any documentation or anything like that. They're just asking you to basically self-certify. If at the end of the 6 months, you realize that you're just not in a position to catch up and you need another 6 months, then you can apply for an additional 6 months. So up to a total of 12 months of suspended payments. But you gotta make sure to remember to apply for that second 6-month increment within the first 6 months before your first 6 months expires. As far as the repayment terms, those are going to be on an individual basis. And with the federally backed loans, it looks like the options they're considering are going to be an extended repayment term for the months that you missed, or some sort of loan modification. I think we're going to get more information on all of this as more time passes, because right now it's a little bit premature. We don't know how long the pandemic is going to go on. We don't know how long it's going to take for people to get their jobs back, if some of them will not get their jobs back or whatever it is. And there's going to be no late fees and no negative credit reporting, again, if you enter into an agreement with them. But keep in mind that they are allowed to report a forbearance. So that might affect you in terms of refinancing down the line or getting a new home, things along those lines. So make sure you understand the repercussions of what you're doing, and make sure you understand that none of this is forgiven payments. You are going to have to make it up at some point. So again, if you're in a position where you're still able to make your payments, it's easier for you to make your payments. Now, when you have a conventional loan, so not related to Fannie or Freddie, then things get a little bit more complicated than that. So you might have seen the announcement our governor made that he's entered into an agreement with most of the major banks and 200 state chartered smaller banks to put in some protections in place. The thing is, most of them are in fact offering the 90 days for you not to make payments. And some of them are putting this in the form of a deferment. Some of them are putting it in the form of a forbearance or a suspension. So best case scenario, as far as repayment terms, your lender will take whatever amounts you skipped and they will add that to the back end of your loan. The middle scenario is they'll allow you an extended period of time once things resume to repay those months that you skipped. But the worst case scenario, which is what we're seeing with a lot of the major banks right now, is that as of right now, when you call them and you request some sort of a payment suspension, the option they're giving you is you can skip 3 months of payments, but come month 4, you need to come up with the full arrears. So all of those 3 months that you skipped plus month 4, which obviously, if things continue at this rate, is not realistic and it's problematic. So my colleagues and I, what we are thinking is that most of these lenders, they're gonna have to reevaluate their policies, the ones that are doing this. And as we get closer to that 90-day mark with the third skipped payment, they'll probably look at your case on an individual basis and they'll probably reevaluate. So they'll probably give you an extended period of time, or hopefully they'll give you an option to apply for a loan modification. We just don't know at this point. Keep in mind that some lenders are allowing you to add it to the back end of your loan. Just make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into. Make sure that the repayment terms are very clear to you before you enter into any sort of agreement like this. And as with the Freddie and Fannie Mae loans, no late fees, no negative credit reporting if you enter into an agreement with them. But again, they are allowed to report a forbearance. So if you don't want to go those routes, what are some other alternatives for you? We don't have a ton of alternatives, I'm sorry to say, but some things you might want to consider. If you're one of those lucky ones that has not been financially affected too much, like you haven't lost your job or you haven't had huge reduction in hours and your credit is in good standing, while the rates are still on the lower end, you might want to consider a refinance if it makes sense in your case. And what most mortgage brokers are able to do is they structure the loan in such a way that your first payment on that would be due 1 to 2 months from now. Keep in mind that if you go with the option to skip the payments, like the forbearances, then that's going to affect your ability to do a refi. You have to be current in order to do a refi. And you got to be more or less certain that you're going to have job security if you're doing a refi. Another option is going to be loan modifications. And I think that we're going to see a lot more of this over the next few months, because inevitably some people are not going to be able to completely catch up on all the mortgage payments that they skipped. So they're going to need some sort of recourse. So with loan modifications, I saw a lot of these post 2008, 2009, 2010, where there were a lot of Chapter 13 filings due to failed loan modifications. So my word of advice with loan modifications is do your research early on, and you gather the documents you might possibly need so that you're not scrambling for things last minute, and do your research as far as how much people are allowed to charge you upfront for it, if anything, what the timeline looks like, what the repayment's going to look like, more or less. So familiarize yourself with the process, and also make sure you do your research on whoever you're dealing with. I always recommend you deal with an attorney, not a non-attorney. When you're dealing with loan modifications, an attorney who knows the laws, the ins and outs of not only loan modifications, but also things like foreclosures and things like bankruptcy, because then that attorney has comprehensive knowledge of how everything works and can let you know which option is going to work best for you. And finally, if all of this fails, then you might want to consider a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. I have a feeling that there's going to be a spike in Chapter 13 bankruptcy filings when all of this is done, because if the loan modifications, especially if the loan modifications are not offered or are not approved, then some people will have no choice but to file a Chapter 13 bankruptcy. What a Chapter 13 bankruptcy does is it allows you to catch up on your mortgage arrears through a 3 to 5 year repayment plan. In those 3 to 5 years, you're still going to be responsible for making your regular monthly mortgage payments, and you're going to have an additional Chapter 13 bankruptcy payment that you're going to give to a Chapter 13 trustee, who's going to disperse that to your mortgage lender. So when you come out of your Chapter 13, you're going to be caught up on your mortgage arrears. Again, this is not an ideal situation. I don't like pushing people into bankruptcy if there's a way to avoid it, but just know that as a last resort, that is an option for you to save your home from foreclosure. And on the topic of mortgages and properties, so property taxes were due on April 10th. And unfortunately, that deadline was not extended. So if you did not make your property tax payment, then you need to apply for a penalty abatement if you qualify. So your reason for requesting the penalty abatement is going to have to be related to a financial distress situation that's related to COVID-19, obviously. And I put in the website links for LA County and Orange County. And I'm pretty sure that most other counties are offering something similar, where if you can show that the reason you were unable to make the payment was due to COVID-19 and income loss, then they will at least cancel out that penalty, which is around 10%. And now I want to move on to tenants' rights. You don't have a whole ton of options, but I tried to put together, whatever there is available. So our governor put out a California executive order putting a moratorium on evictions and foreclosures in California through the end of May if the tenant is unable to pay rent due to COVID-19. So under the California executive order, you as a tenant have to declare in writing and give notice to your landlord if you're not going to be paying the full rent, or if you're not going to be paying rent at all. You have to let them know no more than 7 days after the payment comes due, and put it in writing and make sure to state that the reason for that is related to COVID-19. The landlord may request documentation from you for that economic hardship because they don't want people overwhelming the system. They don't want people taking advantage of the system, because they want to be able to help out those that actually need the help and have been affected the most. It's highly recommended that you retain this kind of information, because if things ever end up in state court or in litigation, you want to have the proof ready. And the rent is not forgiven. So similar to all the other kinds of payments I discussed, credit cards, vehicles, mortgages, nothing is forgiven. You're just getting a temporary suspension on making the payments. Under the California executive order, the tenant is responsible to repay in a timely manner. It doesn't really go into details on what exactly they consider a timely manner. I know some people have been contemplating, I've seen a lot of talk online, if they should enter into a new or some sort of a repayment agreement with their landlord. I'm not a landlord-tenant attorney, so keep that in mind. But what I have seen a lot of landlord-tenant attorneys advise on the tenant side is don't enter into a written repayment agreement right now, because things are just too much up in the air. We don't know how long this is going to last. We don't know. What if you enter into an agreement that's binding and then you default on that because 2-3 months from now you're still not in a position to repay? And also, as of right now, there's nothing directly talking about rent forgiveness, but if down the line there was something like that, a program that was formed, you don't want to now have a signed agreement with your landlord and then not be able to qualify for some sort of rent forgiveness. So to recap, you do need to let your landlord know and try to be reasonable, because the landlord also has a mortgage that they need to pay. Some landlords depend on rental income to feed their own families, you know. But just try to keep a good relationship with them and keep all of your documentation for your own records and be ready to produce them if you need to. If you need more information on this, oh yes.
This is Talia. I just want to quickly ask, did these guidelines apply to just residential or to commercial property as well?
So right now I'm focusing on the residential. There's some guidelines, there are some protections put in place for the commercial as well. And there's a lot of overlap on there. And the site for the COVID-19.ca.gov that I put in there has all the like nitty-gritty details. But yeah, there's a lot of protections put in place for commercial tenants as well. Okay, so go onto this website to check out all the little details and qualifications, and it just has a lot of really useful information. Now, for the city of LA specifically, the mayor of LA signed several ordinances, and this is a summary of kind of just the few that he has signed. There's obviously changes every few days. They're issuing new ordinances, but the basic gist of it is that the tenants cannot be evicted for non-payment of rent if the non-payment is due to COVID-19 until or while this local emergency, so City of LA emergency, is still going on. And again, that does not relieve your obligation to pay rent. Now, the City of LA ordinance is a little bit more specific than the California one, and what it says is that tenants have 12 months from the expiration of the local emergency to pay back whatever rent they haven't paid. And the landlords cannot charge interest or late fee on this. Under the Los Angeles City one, again, you have to make sure your property where you're living is Los Angeles City. There is no obligation to give notice to the landlord like there is with the California one. But I would say that it's just good practice to do that anyway. You don't want to strain your relationship with your landlord any more than you have to. And again, to be mindful of your landlord as well, so they're kind of in the loop of what's going on. There is a rent increase freeze on those rental units subject to LA's rent stabilization ordinance. If you're not sure if where you're living falls under that, I put out a number. You can text RSO to that number and check. They will get back to you on this. There's a tenant helpline that City of LA specifically set up Monday through Friday, 8:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m., Saturday, Sunday, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. And there's a phone number you can call if you have questions, specific questions about your situation. Again, keep in mind, call times and hold times are very long right now. If you're dealing with a landlord who's not compliant, but make sure you check all the stuff on the website to make sure that they are indeed non-compliant, then you can file a complaint against them. And I included the website where you can go ahead and do that. That's the hcidla.lacity.org /file a complaint. And if you just want to get more information on tenants' rights, then you can go ahead and go into the coronavirus LA City website and look into that. Do we want to answer any questions right now before I go into student loans?
Sure. If anyone has any questions, you can type them in the Q&A chat icon at the bottom of your Zoom. But I don't believe we have anything right now.
Okay, great. So if anything pops up, I'll stop and answer them. So for now, I'm going to discuss student loans for a bit. If you have federal student loans and they're being serviced by FedLoan or Navient, right now, all payments and interest have been suspended through the end of September of this year. This is one of the few things that's automatic, the one that you do not need to initiate contact with your lender, like it's done for you. Auto payments, if you're on auto pay for your student loans, they'll be stopped. If you made some sort of a payment after March 13th and you really need that money right now, you can request a refund for it and they'll refund you. So for those student loans, again, that are serviced through FedLoan or Navient, you don't need to worry about this. This is automatic and it's through the end of September. And if you're on the payment, on the forgiveness programs, that's not going to impact your eligibility, and these months will count toward your eligibility. So it's not going to negatively impact you. If you have private student loans or your student loans are serviced by anyone other than FedLoan or Navient, get in touch with your servicer. I think, again, the easiest way is going to be to do it online if you have that option. And most of them are offering some sort of a forbearance, some sort of a suspension. Everybody understands what's going on. But I think the main thing to remember is that aside from this one federal student loan situation, nothing else that I've mentioned is automatic. You need to take initiative. You need to make sure you're contacting your various lenders, and you need to make sure that everybody knows that you're on the same page. And I don't have this in my slide, but basically for utilities, it's the same thing as it is for all the things I mentioned. A lot, gas company, water, there's some protections put in place by the mayor and the governor for them not to shut off essential things like water and power if you're not able to make those payments. But again, even with those protections in place, I think it's better if you contact them and let them know, so it's not just out of the blue. As far as income taxes are concerned, the IRS and the Franchise Tax Board, they extended the deadlines to file and to pay. So the new deadline is July 15th, 2020. If you need more time to file your taxes, then you can apply for an extension, and that extension will be good for 6 months. But that extension, the one that goes past July 15th, 2020, it's only to file the taxes. It's not an extension to pay. So at that point, basically after July 15th, you would be responsible for interest, penalties, all of those things that are going to start to accrue. So if you are able to get everything done by July 15th, then go ahead and get everything done by July 15th. If you're currently on a repayment plan with the IRS and the Franchise Tax Board, and you cannot afford to make those payments, you need to contact them to arrange for something. Now, I know that they're working on with limited staff, and they're asking people not to call them right now because I guess they were overwhelmed with people trying to call for the stimulus checks and all of these things. So try to see what resources you have online if you have an online account set up. And from my understanding right now, the collection efforts are kind of on hold. And it's best to talk to a tax professional about this stuff. And if you are in a position where you have high tax liability, this might be a good time to start discussing with a tax attorney or a CPA whether you qualify for offers in compromise. I'd like to go into the different financial relief options that are available from the government to people.
Hey, Karine,
Yes.
do you have time to take one question?
Sure.
Are the IRS and FTB extensions to July 15 automatic? And does the need to file past April 15 have to be related to COVID-19?
They are automatic. The July 15th deadline is automatic.
And then how about estimated taxes that are paid quarterly? Are those deferred?
I believe there's been an extension for those as well, up to, I can't remember, I think there was a couple of things that the deadline is June 15th and then the rest are July 15th, but that information is going to be on the IRS website as well. But just overall, everybody's being very understanding about all of this. I think the least understanding so far was the property taxes. But even then, they're allowing abatement of penalties.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so let's move on to the EDD. So if you've been laid off work or you've had reduced hours, excuse me, then you can go ahead and apply for unemployment through the EDD website. They have created a coronavirus page with a lot of helpful information on there. So we know that generally if you're a W-2 employee, you get laid off, you apply for EDD even in normal times. Now, what's good, we've seen some progress recently, is that now EDD is making certain exceptions for self-employed individuals and independent contractors that normally would not qualify for unemployment benefits, but because of the situation, they do. So certain things like if you drive Lyft, if you drive Uber, if you were miscategorized, go ahead and apply. They're taking these on a case-by-case basis. You're going to get some claim information. Keep in mind that it's delayed time. You know, they were promising on the websites that everything's going to be very quick. I know people that applied 2 weeks ago and their claims are still pending. So apply for whatever you apply for, and then EDD will do its job to see whether you qualify or not. But that's a little bit of relief for self-employed individuals and independent contractors. So the California unemployment insurance benefits are generally up to $450 a week. That's basically a cap. Most people are going to get less than that. It just depends on what your prior income looked like before you got laid off. And under the CARES Act benefits, there's going to be an additional $600 a week. So if you're at that higher end, then you're potentially looking at a benefit of $1,050 a week. And even though this is funded by the federal government, that money you're going to be getting it through EDD. So you don't need to file a separate federal application or anything like that if they're processing your EDD claims. And then they're just going to tack that on. And they just started doing that, I believe, on Sunday. So give it a little bit of time for that additional $600 a week. I have in parentheses here to be mindful of a tax liability. Two things I want to mention about taxes. First off, if you're not electing to have your taxes withheld from the unemployment benefits, keep in mind and be prepared that at the end of the year, when it's time for taxes, you have a tax liability on that. So just plan ahead for that. And secondly, this affects some people that, let's say, are on the lower income bracket. So for some people, getting the additional $600 a week for a certain amount of months might push them toward a higher tax bracket, which might impact their tax liability slightly. So again, keep that in mind, talk to a tax preparer, and just so you don't have any surprises. But obviously right now, if you're in a situation where you have no income coming in, you got to feed your family, that's your priority right now, not a tax liability. You can also, through the EDD website, apply for disability insurance claim if you yourself are unable to work because you were ill with COVID-19. And you can apply for paid family leave. You can submit that kind of a claim if you're unable to work because you're caring for an ill or quarantined family member with COVID-19. So these are just different types of resources that are available to you, and it's kind of a one-stop shop on the edd.ca.gov website. It's going to have all the information, all the eligibility requirements, approximate timelines, and you basically do everything online. But again, keep in mind it's taking several weeks right now.
Karine?
Yes.
Does EDD cover owner of small incorporated corporations?
There's a new program under the CARES Act that will possibly cover those, and we're going to be coming up on that in just a couple of slides.
Okay, awesome.
So another program that's available for California residents is through CalFresh. And on the CalFresh website is where you apply. You can get up to $194 a month per qualifying household member. And generally you need documents like ID, proof of income, if you're a student, proof of student status, if you're non-citizen, proof of immigration status. So this is money that they give you for food, for groceries, and it has certain limitations on what kind of stuff you can spend it on, where you can spend it. It's not ideal, but it's something for people that really need it right now. Keep in mind that if you're not a citizen, this might affect your eligibility in terms of being a public charge. So look up that information online. It may or may not, but just double check that because you don't want that to affect it. Something new that came out just a couple of days ago that was announced by the mayor of LA is an Angelino card. So this is available only to LA City residents. And they're basically prepaid cash cards for low-income Angelinos, and they range between $700 to $15. It's a one-time thing that they give you. It's not monthly benefits, and they're giving it to those who are most in need. You have to qualify. The three things that are required is your household has to be in City of LA, and they have all the zip codes that are covered under City of LA on their website. The total annual income has to have been before COVID below the federal poverty line. And due to COVID, the household income has fallen into deeper economic hardship, and at least one member has experienced a reduction of income of at least 50% or lost a job. You can apply online. I've put the website on there. You can also apply over the phone. The application period is very, very short. They announced this yesterday, and yesterday their site crashed. It's back up, but basically only yesterday, today, and tomorrow, and that's it. It gets closed out tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. and the applications are only accepted within the app between the hours of 8:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. This one is not considered a public charge. The money is coming out of the mayor's fund, and it's coming out of donations from the public. And immigration status does not matter for this. So even if you're undocumented, you can go ahead and apply for this. Again, keep in mind the application period ends tomorrow at 4:30 p.m. And what they're saying is that if the number of applications received exceeds whatever amounts they have available, then they're just going to pick people at random who they're going to give these Angelino cards to. And who knows, maybe they'll do a second round of Angelino cards if they get more donations or more money allocated to them. But for now, this is just a very short thing that those who truly, truly need it can take advantage of. As far as stimulus checks, I know that several people have already received them starting last night. the IRS is advising people to check their bank accounts several times throughout the day to see if there's some sort of an update. So there's a lot of details that go into the stimulus checks, but the basics are, you know, for people up to 75,000 adjusted gross income individual, you're getting $1,200. If you're head of household with up to 112,500, you're getting $1,200. If you're a married couple filing jointly with income up to 150,000, you guys are getting $2,400. You can get up to additional $500 per qualifying child. And there's reduced stimulus checks for people within the brackets that I listed. And if you're above the brackets I listed, then you don't get a stimulus check. And they're using your 2019 tax returns. If you haven't filed those, then they're going to be using your 2018. If you have direct deposit set up for your previous years, then they're going to just automatically deposit that into that account and you don't need to do anything about it. Now, the good news with the stimulus checks is that people who are receiving Social Security, railroad retirement, disability, veterans benefits, or those who don't make enough to file every single year, they're eligible to receive it as well. So if the government has your information already, let's just say you're getting your Social Security benefits automatically deposited into your bank account every month, then you don't need to do anything. If they have your information, they're going to deposit it on there. If they don't have your information, or if you haven't filed taxes in a really long time because you haven't needed to, then I put in a link on there that's going to have all the information, and it's also going to have a link where you can enter in your current information so that you can get the stimulus check. And again, a lot of people got them today. Hopefully a lot of people will get them tomorrow, but just be patient for them. They are coming, just taking a little bit more than anticipated. The IRS has a tool on there where you can put in your Social Security and date of birth and some information to find out the status of your check. But several clients of mine who have checked, they weren't really able to get concrete answers. It just has a generic language in there of, we don't know if you qualify yet. So keep that in mind. So I'm going to move on to the small business owners. I know a lot of us here are small business owners, and a lot of us are frustrated by the SBA loans, that whole process, and what assistance is available. So, you know, we're limited in our options. Basically, you're looking at SBA loans, and you're looking at a possible pandemic unemployment assistance, which is PUA, as part of the CARES Act, which is going to be dispersed through EDD benefits. So Kelly, this was in response to a question somebody asked about the small business owners. As of this morning, the EDD website was saying that they don't have full-on information about all of this yet, about the logistics, how they're going to implement everything, how they're going to disperse the payments, and all of that. As of right now, that specific PUA benefit application is not available on the EDD website. I'm hoping that we'll have some update on that within the next couple of weeks. They did have language in there that said, if you're not sure which type you qualify for, just file a regular unemployment claim and then we'll decide for you. So if you want to get a head start, you can already apply for that, or you can wait to get some more information on the PUA as we get more information about how it's actually going to be implemented via EDD. But if you want some general information, if you go to the EDD website and just search for PUA, you're gonna get a little bit of information and hopefully some good news for some of you who are sole proprietors or owners of small businesses who didn't have too many options with the SBA. And one other option might be a Chapter 11 reorganization. So just like I warned with the Chapter 13, we don't want people filing bankruptcies if they don't have to. We also don't want businesses filing bankruptcies if they don't have to. But we also have to be realistic and realize that, unfortunately, for some businesses, this might be an option that they will have to explore down the line if they're not able to come out of this on their own. As part of the new legislation, there have been some changes made to the bankruptcy code. Basically, we're referring to them as subchapter 5s. And these are going to be kind of like mini chapter 11s for smaller businesses that make it more affordable, more realistic. But we're waiting on more information on this. So I don't have a ton of information to share with you on these. I might do another webinar down the line as we get more information, because I think subchapter 5s are going to be pretty important for small businesses over the next few months. As far as the SBA loans, there's two main types: the Paycheck Protection Program, or the PPP, and the EIDL. So that's the Economic Injury Disaster Loan. I think a lot of people get these two confused, or they think there's only one type of SBA loan in this particular situation. So I try to point out the differences. With the PPP, you're applying through your business bank or through an SBA broker. I know a lot of my colleagues had a difficult time applying for these through their business bank. I know banks were not well prepared. Wells Fargo especially was not. There's some rumor going around that Wells Fargo might open PPPs up for a second round. We're waiting on news for that. But if you were unable to apply through your business bank, or whatever bank you went to wanted a prior lending relationship, you might have better luck with an SBA broker and try to apply it that way. The good thing about this kind of loan is that you can apply to have this loan forgiven, provided that you meet the requirements. And there's a whole long list of requirements on the SBA website. But the general idea is this is designed for paycheck protection, right? It's designed to keep people employed. So you have to show that you spend at least 75% of the proceeds from the loan to cover payroll costs. The other 25% can be used for allowable expenses, business rent, utilities, mortgage interest, and it has to be within an 8-week period after the loan is made. And so this forgiveness is not automatic, right? You have to apply for it, and you have to show proof that you met all these requirements. One thing that a lot of attorneys are recommending is for you to have a separate business account where you're going to have the loan proceeds in there, and you're going to do the spending out of that account, so you can keep proper accounting for everything with no commingling, and you have proof to present. Your bank will then have 60 days to decide which portion, or if all of it, is being forgiven. The amount that's not is a loan, and it has a 2-year repayment term at 1% interest. Payments are deferred for 6 months, but the interest continues to accumulate, and you can prepay early if you choose to. Now, for the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, you can apply for that directly through the SBA website. And that one is a lot easier as far as the application process, pretty short application. This one is not, the loan itself is not forgivable. The advance that they give you on the loan is forgivable. Now, prior to a few days ago, they were offering advances of up to $10,000 for small business owners. They just sent out an email a couple of days ago saying that because of the number of applications they received, and to make things fair and to have money available for everybody, what they're doing is the advance is up to $10,000, but only up to $1,000 per employee. So if it's you and a paralegal, let's say, then your advance is $2,000. However, the terms of repayment are still pretty favorable. So if you need a loan to keep you going, to keep your business operating costs going, then it's a 30-year repayment, up to 30 years, and 3.75% interest. And again, no penalty for early repayment. And payments for this one are deferred for up to 1 year. And I just want to point out that Simon Kinda actually on Friday, April 10th, did a really great presentation on the SBA loans, comparing them, giving examples of repayments and all of that. So I would recommend you check out his webinar for the SBA loan questions. There's a ton of information on there. And the SBA website also has a good amount of information. Do we have questions about this stuff before I move on to bankruptcy?
Yes, we had a question early on about paid family leave. Mm-hmm. Do you qualify for paid family leave if you are self-isolating due to exposure to a family member who travels internationally?
That's an interesting one. I think it's a good, like, there's no harm in applying. So I would say apply, because they themselves are not super clear on all of their guidelines. But I think it might, so if it was like an immediate family member that you live with or something like that who was exposed and now is technically in quarantine, then I would think it would make sense that you would also qualify based along those lines.
And we have a number of questions, to no one's surprise, on PPP. Yeah. Do you want me to read off those questions, or would you like to direct folks to Simon's presentation last Friday?
I can try to see if I can answer them, and if not, then we can direct them to Simon.
Okay. So on the PPP, we are thinking of letting some staff go, the rehiring them with the PPP funds come in. Would this affect eligibility?
I believe there was specific language in there that you could rehire them and it would help with your eligibility to rehire them. You're basically trying to keep the payroll amounts similar to what they were prior to this situation.
And what type of backup documents are required for PPP loan?
So this one, what they want, the best documentation to have is actual payroll records, right? Of like the W-2s and whatever it is your accountant has provided. Now it gets a little bit more tricky when you're dealing with 1099s. I believe if I was listening to a presentation of another attorney who was discussing this, that 1099 is not covered through the PPP. So you're looking at W-2s. But if you're self-employed and you're giving yourself some sort of income, profit and loss statements, bank statements, basically stuff that's consistent. They don't want you to have never given yourself some sort of, income, and now all of a sudden you're showing that you were. And that's the gist of it. But I think Simon is probably the better person for that.
Yes, and for those of you on today who are asking for Simon's PowerPoint deck, I will send out the link to his YouTube video, the presentation he did for us on Friday, and I'll also send you his presentation deck as well. We have a couple more questions on PPP. Are PPP funds available only to currently open essential businesses, or can businesses that are currently closed use PPP funds when they reopen?
I do not know the answer to that, unfortunately. I think that, so my understanding is because they want people to stay on payroll. And so I would imagine that it would be even if you're close, but you're still, there's an 8-week period after the loan is made where you have to disperse this payroll and all of that. So I don't think you can wait until you reopen. I think the point is to pay the people within these 8 weeks after the loan is dispersed.
Okay, and then last question on that. Does forgiveness of the PPP loan affect the credit of a sole proprietor or independent contractor who receives payment?
I don't think that it would, but I would see, I don't remember seeing that on Simon's presentation, but maybe shoot him an email and see if he would know that. I don't think that it would.
Great, I think that's it for now. Thank you.
Okay. So now we're moving on to the final part, and that's, when all else fails, and you have to consider bankruptcy. So if bankruptcy is necessary, just some words of caution. Make sure you're dealing with an attorney who has significant bankruptcy experience, not with a general practitioner. And that doesn't have to be me. I can gladly refer you to any one of my colleagues, or you can look on NAGBA or any other sites out there that deal specifically with bankruptcy attorneys, because bankruptcy law is a lot more than just filling out some forms. There's a lot of intricacies, especially when it comes to the protection of assets. And assets could be something intangible, right? Like a pending lawsuit for personal injury or something like that. So what I'm seeing a lot of is advertisements by BPPs, who are bankruptcy petition preparers. Be very wary of those. They're not allowed to give you any legal advice. They're not allowed to tell you, let's say, which exemptions to use, anything like that. All they're allowed to do is fill out your forms, and they cannot charge you more than $200. If they do, then they're violating federal law and should be reported. This isn't to say that every single BPP out there is preying on innocent people. Just something to keep in mind. Do your research. And what a lot of people don't realize is that there's no automatic right to a voluntary dismissal in a Chapter 7. So some people think, oh, I'll file it. If something goes wrong, I'll just, I'll dismiss it. Or I won't show up to my hearing and I'll get dismissed. Well, if you have an aggressive trustee and the trustee has found that there's material misstatements, you're trying to conceal significant assets, there's some sort of fraud going on, they're not going to just let your case get dismissed, and they might refer you to the US DOJ or FBI for bankruptcy crimes. And if you're an attorney trying to get into the bankruptcy field, I would highly recommend that you mentor with somebody before you jump into filing your own case. And things that I would keep an eye out on, whether you're an attorney that's going to be filing bankruptcies for somebody and is kind of new to this field, or whether you're on the other end of it and you need to file bankruptcy or a loved one does. You want to make sure that you're very careful with assets, like what assets are unexempt and what are not. If you have too much equity in your home, then you don't want to file a Chapter 7 because only a certain amount can be protected. You want to be very careful with property transfers. This is a big one we see. People often co-sign for family members and friends, and they never live in that house. They never make the mortgage payments, so they assume it's not theirs, and they signed over a quitclaim deed a year ago. Well, if they file for Chapter 7, they're going to be in trouble. And for preferential repayments to family members and friends and insiders, basically, if you're filing for Chapter 7, then you have to treat your unsecured creditors equally. So they don't want you to pay back your family member, let's say, and not pay back your creditors. And if they find out that you've done that, you could get into a lot of trouble for that as well. And we're almost done. Just wanted to go over the 3 main types of bankruptcy. We have a Chapter 7, a 13, and an 11. Those are the most common ones we see. So Chapter 7 is what you typically think of, like a liquidation. It's the shortest one, no repayment period, nothing like that. And basically what this does is for people who have a lot of unsecured debt, not a lot of assets, not too high income. So let's say a typical client, $40,000, $50,000 in credit card debt, making below the median income for a household in California. They're going to file a Chapter 7, get rid of their unsecured debt like credit cards and things like that. Chapter 13 is a personal reorganization on your debts. So this is going to be possibly a solution for those that fall behind on their mortgage and don't have any other options. So this would allow you to catch up on your mortgage arrears over the next 3 to 5 years. And also some other types of debts. Common ones we see are property taxes, certain income taxes that are not subject to a discharge, or the person might just make too much money to qualify for a Chapter 7 or have too much equity in their home to qualify for a Chapter 7. So 13s are a lot more expensive and a much bigger time commitment. And then we have the Chapter 11s, which are for business reorganizations. They can also be individual reorganizations for really high income people. That's why you see some celebrities filing Chapter 11s. But the main context we see it in is businesses, and the term of your repayment varies. It's a lot more complicated. Attorney fees are very expensive. The filing fee alone is like $1,700. But the Chapter 11s, this is the one I told you about where we're waiting on news for the Subchapter 5, which is going to be like mini Chapter 11s that will hopefully help bail out some of the small business owners that might benefit from a bankruptcy. And I'm pretty much done on my part. If there are any questions, I'm going to address them. If there's anything you think of afterwards, feel free to email me or Kelly, and I have my contact information on here, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, I think we have enough time to take one more. I know we're a little over right now, it's 1:04. The question is, and I think this is regarding to Chapter 7, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the question is, what about stimulus checks and exempting them, especially when using California 704 exemption?
So what we've been doing, we haven't had any hearings yet where the stimulus check issue would have come up. So I have to kind of wait and see what the trustee response is going to be, let's say a month from now, on the cases I filed last week or something like that. So the ones that I've had so far that I've filed after the news of the stimulus checks have come out, those clients were eligible for 703 exemptions, not 704, and we just exempted it under the wild card. I'm not sure what it would fall into with the 704 or how the Chapter 7 trustees are going to react to it. But from the bankruptcy attorney forums that we've been on back and forth, it looks like most of the trustees in other districts so far are not being very aggressive about collecting on that, because they realize that everybody's going through this difficult time and that this is an unprecedented kind of thing